All right, so this is our annual service where I just take a little time and share with you some thoughts about the new year, maybe look back a little bit at the previous year. I'm going to have you turn to Genesis. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Genesis chapter 2. We're going to look there a little bit again. We've been there quite a bit recently in Genesis, and we'll look there a little bit this morning. I want to talk about 2018 and what we're hoping for in that year, and I want to say up front, this is so important. We know that every day is a gift from God to us, right? And He tells us He's going to take care of us, and He tells us that we really can't know what the next day or the next week or the next month is going to hold for us. He does. Jill and I were talking about, heading into a new year here at the church and how encouraging it is and liberating to know that unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Remember that verse? And God has been building, sustaining this church for years, way before I came here, and then I've been here, believe it or not, 10 years. It'll be 10 years wait a minute, we already passed 10-year mark. Yeah, 10 years last July. So a decade, which is crazy how long of a time that is, but just flown by. But God's been at work the whole time, and so I just want to share a few thoughts as we go into the new year, and really it's going to be familiar to you. Same theme, this community of help idea. I had a series that I did, I don't know how long, a couple months long, and just talked about how do we understand help and what it means to be helped by God and helped by one another as God helps us. And Genesis really gets us thinking along those lines right away when God describes how He created the world and He created man and woman, and He says that it's not good for Adam to be alone, right? And he needs a helper, and so He creates Eve to be his helper. And pretty quickly, help goes wrong, doesn't it? To where they're not really helping each other in the way they needed help the most. They were helping each other kind of in their rebellion, helping each other to sin, basically. And so help goes wrong pretty quickly, and God steps in and gives the greatest help, the real help they needed and the real help that we need. And from there, we believe that the church has been established. For those who believe in Jesus, it's been established as a place in which we receive that help from God that we so desperately need. I received that help this morning sitting in Sunday school. I sit there passively. Don's teaching. Other people are contributing. I don't think I said a word. I think I prayed, but that was about it. I didn't say a word this morning. Just receiving, just listening and hearing the gospel, hearing the truth. I needed that this morning. For whatever reason, in my own mind, just like you, I have all sorts of things going through, and I get stuck, and I get in places where I'm blind to God, I'm blind to what He's up to, and can be, I don't know, discouraged. And here's what I do to myself, and I don't know if you do this to yourself, but I get discouraged, and I beat myself up for being discouraged. I kind of take a step back from my life. I look at myself and what I have, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? You have it so good. Why are you discouraged? Or why is your soul cast down, to use biblical psalm language? And the psalmist says, hope in God. And so when I hear the truth coming through Don or through one of you, it just feeds me. It teaches me. It speaks truth to me. And that's just a little example of what this church is here for. I believe God's established it for that purpose. And I'm going to share a little embarrassing story with you for your benefit. And it'll illustrate this idea. As I get older, when I was younger, growing up, and even young adulthood, I didn't have an aversion to getting help from people. I mean, I'm sort of a team player type of dude. I'm a relational type of guy, so I like to work as a team. I like to get help. But as I get older, for some reason, I like that less and less. I don't know why. There's probably a whole bunch of reasons. Part of it, even to me, is a little bit embarrassing. I look back at the way I would think and the way I would operate, and I think, gosh, that was pathetic and embarrassing. Like, you just stand on your own 2 feet. Be your own man. And in some ways, I sort of believe that more and more, and there's probably some healthy truth there. But let me tell you what happened a few months ago. So it was one of the last nice days where it was kind of warm still, and Jill and I were talking about projects that we need to get done in the house before the colder months came in. And we wanted to wash the windows on the outside of the house. And so we had this Monday carved out, and kids went to school. And as Jill and I were talking about our plan for the day and how we were going to attack these jobs we had to do, we kind of had a different version of that. We had a different good way to go about the day and to go about our work. So Jill was going to go and run some errands, and I said, well, I'm going to just start by washing the windows. I'm just going to get that done. And I had this great idea. I'll start on the second floor and work my way around and go to the bottom and finish those later. So I go to the girls' room, which I've done a ton of times. We just open the window and climb out onto the roof to wash the windows on the outside from the roof. So as I'm climbing through the window, I hear this voice in my head, which now I'm pretty sure was Jill's voice, saying, don't do this. This is not a good idea. Wait till I get home. But because I was a little bit irritated already with her, I said, I'm going to do this. Getting this done. We get the stupid windows washed. So I go out there with my equipment, squeegee, bucket, all that. I'm on the roof. It's not real big area, pretty small area, but I'm not stupid. So I'm thinking, well, I got to put something in the window here to make sure I don't close the window on myself. So I pull, you know where this is going, right? So I pull the cord that's on the blinds from the inside, and it's a pretty thick, it's like 4 or 5 cords kind of woven together. So I'm like, well, I'll pull that through. I'll just let that be my guard so that the window doesn't close on me while I'm squeegeeing it. So guess what happened? The window closed. I'm squeezing and I hear this lock. I'm like, oh no. Please no. And I'm pulling on it. I'm like, I could break this. I'm like, oh gosh. So I locked myself out of the house from the roof. Middle of the day on a Monday, I'm looking up and down the street, nobody really around. I'm looking down, okay, it's like 12 feet probably. And it's kind of on a slope, so I'm like, I don't want to bust my ankle or something. I have bad ankles. So I'm just sitting there, I'm just going to play it cool here. How long could Jill possibly be gone? And I'm remembering when Jill goes running errands, it could be out a day. It could be a long time. I'm on one side of the roof looking over here again, trying to figure out how to get down from there. And I hear this door opening, and I'm like looking around. Is there someone there? And I don't want to ask for help, but at this point, I don't have much of a choice. And then I notice it's my neighbor right here. And as soon as I go, I'm like, his name is Sony. I'm like, Sony. And I didn't want to yell again. I'm not panicking here, trying to play it cool. So I said, and he gets in his car, closes the door, turns the car on, drives away. So another 10 minutes, which felt like 3 hours, goes by. Still looking up and down the street. And I see way down the street in the corner, this is Juliana's favorite part of the story. There's this guy, he's working in his garage. I hear like he's got a power saw going or something. And then he'll come in and out of the garage to his pickup truck. So I'm still thinking, man, please, somebody else come home. Maybe Jill, on some miracle, she'll turn around and come home. Nothing. So I'm like, well, so I'm yelling down the street. Sir, you with the red truck? And I see he sticks his head out of the garage. He goes like this. He goes back in. Comes out. Sir, he looking back. And then he just goes in and like shuts the garage door. And I think he thought he was losing his mind. So another 10 or 15 minutes goes by. And all of a sudden, all this traffic's done. I'm like, oh, great. So here come all these cars. And then my neighbor, Dan, who's a friend of mine, great guy, Christian guy, comes out of his house and right away sees me, big smile on his face. He's like, hey, what's going on up there? He's like, you need some help? Or should I take a picture? I said, yeah, please take a picture, a blackmail picture. So then he comes, he's got a pickup truck, and literally, because he has a 6-foot ladder, has to put the ladder in the back of the pickup truck, back the pickup truck up the sloped driveway as I'm hanging off the side of the house, and he's guiding my feet to the top of the ladder, and people continue driving by. Isn't that the neighborhood pastor / village idiot guy? I needed help. And I hate that I needed help. I didn't even want to tell you that story. I thought, well, they'll laugh. That'll be a good point. They'll give me some strokes. But I didn't want to tell that story. Listen, you need help. I need help. It's embarrassing to need help. It's frustrating to need help. But we need help. We need help with stuff like that. We need help with other stuff. We need help to see ourselves. I'm reading this book, Tech Wise Family. So this is just kind of a book on the topic of balancing technology and family life, just the day in which we're living. And, our houses are invaded by more and more screens. And as a screen addict myself, just wanted to familiarize myself with what's being said about this and how do you manage it, how do you balance it. And it's interesting in the book, and it's from a Christian perspective. In the book, the author talks about relationships and how we're losing the ability to just interact with people. Everything's on a screen, everything's, typing texts and emails and everything else. And just relating to people is sort of a lost art form. And a couple things the author said about relationships I thought were interesting. And they're not going to be new. I mean, we've said these types of things before, but important. He says, he quotes G.K. Chesterton, if you know who he is. A man and a woman cannot live together without having against each other a kind of everlasting joke. Each has discovered that the other is a fool, but a great fool. Yeah, go ahead, wives, you can say amen if you want to that. This largeness, this grossness and gorgeousness of folly is the thing which we all find about those with whom we are in intimate contact. And it is the one enduring basis of affection and even respect. So he says, in an ironic twist, to really know someone is to know that they're a fool, and for them to know that you're a fool. And yet that's the basis of true affection, true connection. Interesting. Later, one other quote I'll read to you. He's talking about how do we establish wisdom? How do we gain wisdom in this world in a practical sense? And he says this, the only way to do it, which is, again, to gain wisdom, is to do so with other people. We need other people who know us and the complexities and difficulties of our lives really well. So well that we can't hide the complexity and difficulty from them. And we need people who love us, who are unreservedly and unconditionally committed to us, our flourishing and our growth no matter what we do. And who are so committed to us that they won't let us stay the way we are. If you don't have people in your life who know you and love you in a radical way, it is very, very unlikely you will ever develop wisdom, true wisdom. You may become smart, you might even become successful, but it's very unlikely you will have a deep enough understanding of yourself and your complex calling to actually become either wise or courageous. We just are too good at deceiving ourselves and think too highly of ourselves. The people who know us best see the truth about who we are, even as they also see more clearly who we could become. Again, in a context of practical wisdom, he's saying there's this need for relationships, for people who see through you, who see you as a fool, and yet who still love you and respect you. Now, I would say, and this is really important to say, that's a miracle when that happens. For there to be that kind of love, that kind of support, relentless support, unconditional support, that's a miracle. I think one of the reasons that I have come to a place in my life where I struggle to work as a team more is because it's frustrating to me, because people frustrate me. And I know I frustrate them. And I'm realizing more and more the truth of Genesis 2 and 3, which is, hey, this is what your human condition is. This is how the problem all began, with us determining for ourselves that we want to be like God. We want to say what is good or not good. Whether that's the strategy for how we're going to attack the projects at the house, or the strategy for how we're going to do things at the church, or any other strategy. We have our own mindset about that, and what is the right way to do it, the best way to do it. And other people are at odds with that and have a different perspective on that. And it's all described here. As Adam and Eve are created for a good purpose, created to relate to one another, to support one another, to love one another, to help each other walk with God, to speak truth, And yet it goes wrong quickly for them. And we'll just jump to chapter 3. I've already kind of summarized some things, but look at chapter 3 and what happens here. Verse 1, now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, indeed has God said, you shall not eat from any tree of the garden? The woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat from it, or touch it, or you will die. The serpent said to the woman, you surely will not die. For God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be open, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw the tree was good for food, that it was a delight to the eyes and desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were open. They knew they were naked. They sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loin coverings. So this again is a sort of a repeated thought, because we've said it before. But I mean, they plunge into sin. They rebel against God. They kind of co-conspire in that endeavor. And then after that happens, they right away begin hiding. And they're hiding from God. They're hiding from each other. And then when God comes and he questions them, do they take ownership for it? Do they say, yeah, you know what, here's my part in the problem. Here's what I've done wrong. No. They point the finger, don't they? They blame the other person. They say, well, Adam says, well, it's the woman you gave me. It's Eve's fault. Eve says, well, it's the serpent that you allowed to come into the garden. God, it's his fault. Kind of all ways of saying, God, it's basically your fault. And this is what we do in relationships. We hide, we blame shift, and we live, listen to this, okay? We live in this mindset of lies, and we live in an atmosphere of lies. That's what it all began with. The deceiver. He comes, he tells a lie, they believe the lie, and it's just this atmosphere of lies. And the lie is entirely destructive, isn't it? Because it blinds them to God's character, what God is really like, and it blinds them to thinking about and treating each other appropriately. It blinds them to that, doesn't it? That's what the lie, the power of the lie, that's what it did. That was the impact of it. And so they were designed for relationships of help, but everything goes wrong. And then God comes in and he helps, doesn't he? God gives the help that they needed the most. And it begins with God just saying, hey guys, here's what's true. And he goes through and he says, there's going to be a curse. Here's what work is going to be like for you. Ladies, here's what labor is going to be like for you. Here's what's going to happen. He just tells them, this is the truth. And it was, I don't know, I mean, would you call it tough love? I mean, it was pretty intense, direct. And then, from there, verse 21 of chapter 3, the Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them, covered them. He took care of them. He redeemed them, we could say. He restored them. He rescued them. He helped them. And then throughout the rest of the Bible, you see this idea of help over and over and over and over again. And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, that word is used of God. Capital H, helper. Just we've been saying over and over, he's the capital K king. He's also the capital H helper. Helping, 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 helping. So, as we think about the new year, one of the things that we're trusting God for, which he's been doing and believe he'll continue to do, is to make this a place where you can come and receive help and receive God's help. There's a bunch of flawed people here, flawed messengers, flawed vessels, but the hope and the prayer is that God will continue to communicate truth to you through us, through others here, that he will continue to peel back the layers, the complexity of who you are, that he will drive the gospel deeper into your soul, and all those lies that you still believe that are deadly to you, deadly to your relationships, deadly to your marriage, deadly to your relationships with whoever, coworkers, kids, everybody, that he will unfold that more and more, that he will peel back and show you what is true, that he will shine the light. That's the type of environment that we need. Those are the types of relationships that we need. And we are convinced that we learn of God most clearly, most deeply, and I'm going to make up a word, most really. We learn of his reality in relationships where there is the friction. The essence of the gospel is that God came down to a bunch of rebellious, hateful, sinful people and laid his life down and allowed them to murder him, to pour out love and to cover and provide an atonement for their sin. Did it while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That is the gospel. And where you learn the gospel is with sinners. You being one, all of them being sinners. And we are persuaded that while it is tempting to cut and run, that it is actually God's good plan that we are in that matrix of sinners. And that's where we learn of him. That's where the truth becomes more than just information. I've been, in past seasons of my life, entrenched in biblical learning that I'm very grateful for, but I see the way it was playing out in my life at that time was almost entirely cerebral. It was learning. It was information. It was data. How does that data come to life? It comes to life when the truth is showing me God, who he is, what he's like, what his character is like, and along with that, who I am. And the connection between the two because of the person and work of Jesus Christ in my life. And so this is a context for that type of thing. And I will tell you bluntly, that is not for the faint of heart. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult. It can be embarrassing, like the story I told you earlier. It's embarrassing. But it's what I need. It's what you need. And it's how and it's where God causes his truth and his unity to be a reality down here. Down here. Another book I'm reading, a professor in seminary recommended this one from a social psychologist. Another one of my counseling classes. And he said, listen to this author and how he's talking about the need for people in our day from a psychological perspective, from a psychological health perspective, how they need to learn to manage their emotions. And so the title of the book is Emotional Intelligence, and the subtitle is The Groundbreaking Book that redefines what it means to be smart. And throughout the book, they give examples of people who are brilliant, super high IQ, but clueless when it came to relationships and how they just destroyed people and they destroyed their own career because of their idiocy when it comes to relationships and emotional intelligence. So the book is advancing this notion that it's important to be in touch with yourself, self-awareness, self-management, all that. So it's secular. Again, God not invoked in this book really. I mean, they talk about religion a little bit, but it's not a Christian book. But interesting, one quote from Aristotle, old philosopher. So listen to this, okay? Anyone can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. Would you say that's not easy? Or would you say that's impossible? I'd say it's impossible. So, as usual, I read things like that and I think of the gospel. Because I think, as humans, we may have kind of a hold on things to a degree, some self-control that is natural. Obviously self-control is the fruit of the Spirit, but we may have a sort of a natural form of that. But if we practice some self-awareness when it comes to our anger, and we are realistic about what the standard of that is in terms of who God is and how his anger plays out, pretty quickly we would be convinced, if we have clarity on it, that we are often angry. And I would say always when we are angry, there's traces of rebellion, sin, hate. So here again is an example of something that in everyday real life experiences is provided by God to say, okay, how do you understand that? Jeff, fill in your name here. How do you understand that anger? Where's that coming from? Why are you angry? What are you wanting? What are you chasing? So as we go into a new year, our prayer is this would be a context in which we can all explore that. Whether it's something you hear from a sermon where it helps you to make a connection or gain a little more clarity on why you're angry or anxious or greedy or whatever, or in a one-on-one conversation at a coffee shop or here or after church or whatever, but that this can be a place where those realities of your everyday life can be explored in safety, in the covering of God as per Genesis 3, and in a place where you can hear the truth. You can hear the truth in terms of the objective truth of God's word, and you can hear the truth in terms of who you are and the folly that you are enslaved to and how God is here to set you free. So as we go into another year, the prayer is that this would be that type of environment, that type of atmosphere. Recently, I was counseling with a friend, and this verse came to my mind, and so we looked it up. Jeremiah 17. Listen to what it says. Familiar verse. The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? And then the next verse it says, I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give to each man according to his ways, according to the results of his deeds. It says, who can understand? Who can understand themselves? Who can understand their heart? Nobody can understand it. You can't understand yourself. You can't understand entirely what makes you tick, why you're angry, why you're anxious, why you're greedy. Maybe parts of that, but to really see it with 100% clarity and precision, you don't have that ability. God says, I search the heart. I know. And then it says later, same section, a few verses later, heal me, O Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved, for you are my praise. Who's the rescuer of the human heart? You, me, our ability to manage it. Where does rescue come from? It comes from our Creator, doesn't it? How does it happen? Well, He works in our lives. We had, for those who are in Sunday school, we had the two circles on the board, and lowercase k kingdom and uppercase k kingdom. And part of His rescue mission in our lives is disrupting the lowercase k kingdom and all that we want. We watched a movie the other night, which I would definitely recommend to you. We watched with the family, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. As a pessimist, even the title draws me right in. Love it. I can identify with this kid, whoever he is. So you watch this movie, and it's great because he's this negative kid, and his life's not going his way. And his family, they're all these positive people around him, right? His dad, his mom, and they're all crushing it in life. They're accomplishing things, and his brother's, a super cool kid with the hot girlfriend at school, and his sister's this, actress who's in the plays, and she's popular, and everyone's crushing it. And then one night, he go to bed wishing that, he wishes or something that things will go horribly wrong for them. And the next day he wakes up and all hell breaks loose in all of their lives. And the rest of the movie is just about everything falling apart and going wrong. And it's hilarious. Steve Carell's in it. He's a great actor. So it's just a hilarious movie as everything goes wrong. And anyway. But by the end, the way the movie wraps up is they all, including Alexander, have learned to kind of embrace things going haywire. And they've been drawn together closer as a family because of having gone through that craziness together. in church land, we often get involved in this church thing because we think, okay, if I go and become part of Christianity, part of a church, I can clean things up, I can get things together, I can get things right. And we try to avoid and prevent all the bad things from happening and make sure just good things happen. And we want to obey, want our kids to obey, so we have this nice little cookie cutter Christian family and have everything kind of under control. And yet what I'm seeing more and more throughout Scripture and throughout my life is that the way God works is by redeeming the things that go wrong, the messes that are made down here. But learning what love is in the midst of the mess, the chaos, the disaster. He redeems. And throughout all of that process of the mess, what is he doing? He's servicing that from which he has set you free. Namely, your anger, your anxiety and fear, your lust and greed. I mean, when God is tinkering with things and things are just not playing out according to your plan, everything's going haywire. It's a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. There's one scene in the movie, I love this part. This just popped in my head. Steve Carell, who is like the most positive guy, he's the Fami, he's the father mommy in the movie, the Fami. He's like a stay-at-home dad for a part of the movie. There's this part where everything's gone wrong in his interview or whatever, and they walking outside of this restaurant, I think, and there's these remember the old silver metal trash cans? They're lined up, and he just goes, boom, this day sucked. And then the kids all get in, yeah, boom, and they're kicking trash cans down. I mean, when the day just sucks. But God teaches you something of love going through the suckiness of it. As you deal with your anger and your frustration and you realize, oh gosh, you realize I'm hurting people, I'm hurting myself, and just that thought of, wait a minute, there's a God who loves me. There's a God who's in charge of all this chaos, who's in control of it, who could have stopped it. He could have made it a wonderful, amazing, very good, whatever day if he wanted to. But he had a reason, he had a purpose. It's not aimless, it's not meaningless, it's meaningful, it means something. And a big part of what it means is it's part of this redemptive plan to rescue you from you and what you think you have to have and how you think it needs to go. And in that, he teaches you what love is, what his love is. And I believe he causes you to experience that with other people too, as you marvel over his love, his plan. So, 2018, kind of more of the same, I would say. Gospel exploration, journey of life. We're all on it. We don't know how long we have. We don't know if we'll make it through this year, right? I don't know. We could end up in World War III. Who knows what's going to happen? We don't know how many days we have. But we have a God who is over it all, even as the sun shines in the windows here, who is over it all, who is with us, who's provided this place for us to walk through all that, the ups, the downs, the goods, the bads, to bump along, struggle along together, to know he's bringing us through. He's bringing us to the promised land. He's bringing us home to where we finally get to be with the true king. And we're finally freed from that little K guy inside. He's bringing us his way, his timing, his plan. So we get to be a part of that for another year together, Lord willing. I'll say just quickly, in terms of practical things, some exciting things coming up that will fit into that. We're going to continue with, the different ministries that we're offering. The ladies' ministries, the Bible studies are starting up again, right? Second full week of February. January. That's right. Where are we? What day is it? It's December 31st, January. Sorry. And the men will be starting in February with our Real Life Grace meetings. That's why February's on my mind. We're going to offer a seminar here, Real Life Grace seminar, in March. I don't have the date in front of me, but in March, we're going to offer that here and have anyone here interested in going deeper with counseling issues, then also invite some other people from the community. Conference I'm doing with Dax up in Bellingham in April for gospel living. All sorts of things going on here. Good opportunities, all for the same purpose of more and more getting in touch with the reality in terms of who our God is and what He's like and what He's up to in our lives. Any thoughts or questions before I'm gonna dismiss anyone who's a non-voting member? But any thoughts, questions you have? Anything? No? Okay. Well, let's do this. I'm gonna close this in prayer, and then I'll come down and we'll have the ballots passed out. And then if you're a voting member, which I'll explain in a second, you can stick around, okay, for the meeting. But for now, let's close in prayer. God, thank you for this time and the little reminders from your word this morning as we got to look at and think about Adam and Eve and how things went in the beginning and how you created them and you created us for relationships, to know and to be known, to love and to be loved, and how tragically things went wrong because of human rebellion and pride and all that, and how you, God, quickly inserted yourself. You didn't leave us to ourselves. You didn't leave us hopeless, but you inserted yourself and came to rescue us. And now that rescue continues in our lives. I pray that you would help us to trust you, help us to rest, help us to see Christ in more real ways and more impactful ways in our lives, and to appreciate the salvation that we enjoy, the status we have as sons and daughters, redeemed, forgiven, cleansed, sanctified, justified. God, help us to delight in that status. It's a gift, and we thank you that even when we go through dark seasons and we can be discouraged or we can have blinders to you, we thank you that you're committed to us regardless, and that you're with us no matter what. You'll never leave us or forsake us. And I pray that would become more real to us as well, and that it would become more real to us in the context of this church and these relationships and these friendships. God, use this place to be a little bit of a retreat for us weekly, and a place we can come together and be honest and experience the grace of Christ and the mercy of Christ to us. We have it so good. God, forgive us for so often failing to see that and so often being thankless. Pray that you'd open our eyes to see not only our salvation, but also everything that you've given us through Christ as a gift. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.